I never thought I'd have to defend my right to be loved. But there I was, sitting in a Charleston courtroom, watching the two people who gave birth to me and then walked away when I was 4 months old, try to convince a judge that they deserved the fortune left to me by the only parents I ever truly knew. My name is Madison Cole, and this is the story of how my biological parents abandoned me as a baby, disappeared for 32 years, and then came back the moment they smelled money. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. My biological mother, Catherine, sat across the aisle in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her husband, my biological father, Marcus, kept adjusting his Rolex, nervous energy wrapped in expensive fabric. They looked like they belonged on a magazine. Cover, successful, polished, perfect. They looked nothing like the people who raised me. I clutched my grandmother's pearl necklace beneath my blazer, feeling its familiar weight against my chest. Eleanor Cole had given it to me on my 16th birthday. "Real beauty," she'd whispered, fastening the clasp, "isn't what shines on the outside, Madison. It's what stays when everything else fades away." She stayed. My grandfather Benjamin stayed, even when it would have been easier to send me to foster care, to let social services handle the infant their daughter had abandoned on their doorstep with nothing but a note that said, "I can't do this." Now, 12 months after Benjamin's death, his daughter Catherine was back, not for me, but for his $3.4 million estate. The judge entered, and everyone rose. Judge Harrison Cooper, a man my grandfather had mentored 20 years ago. Catherine's lawyer probably thought that connection would work against me. They thought Judge Cooper would bend over backward to appear neutral, maybe even favor them to avoid looking biased. They didn't understand that integrity was the first lesson Benjamin Cole taught anyone worth teaching. Opening statements, Judge Cooper announced. Catherine's attorney, a slick-talking man named Vincent Parker, stood first. His voice dripped with practiced sympathy as he painted a picture of a grieving daughter cruelly cut from her father's will by a manipulative granddaughter. "Your Honor," Vincent began, "Judge Benjamin Cole was a pillar of this community. But in his final years, after losing his beloved wife, Eleanor, he fell prey to the influence of the defendant." He gestured toward me. "Without looking my way, Miss Madison Cole systematically isolated an elderly man from his only living child, his daughter Catherine, and her husband, Marcus, turning him against them to secure a substantial inheritance for herself." The words sliced through the air, like knives aimed at my character. I forced myself to breathe the way grandfather taught me during my first mock trial in high school. In, hold, out. The facts would speak. They always did in Benjamin's courtroom. My attorney, Patricia Hughes, a formidable woman with 30 years of Supreme Court experience, rose slowly. Her voice carried a quiet strength that filled every corner of the room. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's story ignores 3 decades of documented truth." She moved forward with the confidence of someone who held all the winning cards. Benjamin Cole changed. His will 10 years ago, a full decade before his death, when his mental faculties were unquestionably intact. The plaintiffs, Catherine and Marcus Wright, abandoned their infant daughter 32 years ago, leaving her with Judge Cole and his wife Eleanor. Patricia paused, letting the weight of those words settle over everyone present. 3 decades of love and presence speak louder than accusations from those who chose absence. This case isn't about manipulation, Your Honor. It's about recognition of what family truly means. Not the people who share your blood, but the people who stay. That word, stay, hung in the air like a challenge. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at Catherine and Marcus, refusing to see if there was any shame in their expressions, any acknowledgement of the 32 years they'd missed by choice. I thought about the Sunday afternoons on Benjamin's porch swing, watching neighborhood kids play catch with their fathers while I pretended the ache in my chest didn't exist. I thought about Eleanor's gentle hands braiding my hair for school photos, teaching me to bake her famous lemon bundt cake, tending the garden that exploded with flowers every summer. They stayed. They chose me every single day for 32 years, and now Catherine wanted to erase that choice with a lawsuit and manufactured tears. The battle for my grandfather's legacy, and my own, had begun. The courtroom reconvened after lunch, and I watched Catherine reapply her lipstick, the same coral shade she wore in the only photograph she'd ever sent me, arriving 3 days after my 16th birthday with no note, no explanation. Patricia slid a thick folder across the table toward me. They've submitted financial statements claiming your grandfather abandoned Catherine financially. My fingers traced the folder's edge. He sent them money for 22 years. Exactly. Patricia's eyes gleamed. $3,200 every single month. $845,000 total. I have every canceled check, every bank statement. Vincent Parker approached the bench like he was performing for an invisible audience, his confidence radiating from his expensive suit. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of Judge Cole's deteriorating mental state in his final decade. Judge Cooper nodded. Proceed. Vincent gestured toward his stack of documents. We have testimony suggesting Judge Cole became increasingly confused about finances and family relationships. We believe Miss Madison Cole took advantage of this confusion, isolating him from his daughter. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. Benjamin had reviewed Supreme Court precedents the week before he died. He'd debated constitutional law over Sunday dinner just days before his heart gave out. Additionally, Vincent continued, we believe Miss Cole exercised undue influence, preventing contact between Judge Cole and his daughter. Catherine dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. The Cole family crest, 3 oak leaves representing strength, endurance, and wisdom, seemed to mock her performance from its embroidered corner. Patricia rose with the fluid grace of someone about to deliver a devastating blow. Your Honor, if I may present documentation that tells quite a different story. She approached with a leather-bound journal, its pages marked with colored tabs. These are Eleanor Cole's personal journals, spanning 30 years. Each entry meticulously documents promised visits from the plaintiffs that never materialized. The courtroom rustled with anticipation as Patricia opened to a flagged page. December 18th, 1998. Catherine promised to visit for Christmas. Bought Madison that red bicycle she wanted, just in case her mother remembers to ask. Wrapped Catherine's gift, too. 4th Christmas she's missed. Catherine's face hardened like marble. Patricia continued, extracting another thick folder. And this, Your Honor, contains Judge Cole's phone logs from the past 20 years. Highlighted calls show repeated attempts to reach Mr. and Mrs. Wright regarding school events, medical emergencies, graduations. None returned. She placed a photo album on the evidence table with careful reverence. And finally, Your Honor, photographs documenting 32 years of milestones. Kindergarten graduation, middle school honor roll, high school valedictorian speech, law school commencement. Judge Cooper leaned forward. And the plaintiffs? Absent from every single photograph, Your Honor. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on his Italian leather shoes. Catherine's perfectly manicured nails drummed against the table, her composure cracking at the edges. The short recess that followed felt like a gift. I escaped to the courthouse garden, where flowers bloomed against ancient stone walls. The same flowers Eleanor had planted everywhere. In garden beds, in pots, even on our kitchen windowsill. Life still blossoms even after someone leaves, she used to say while watering them, not a trace of bitterness in her voice. Just the quiet wisdom of a woman who'd watched her only daughter walk away from her own child. I touched a velvety petal, and suddenly I was 7 again, standing on a kitchen chair helping Eleanor measure ingredients for her lemon bundt cake. Every Saturday morning, the same beautiful ritual, sifting flour, cracking eggs, the citrus zing of lemon zest under my fingernails. Baking requires precision and patience, she'd say, her silver-streaked hair falling across her forehead. Just like life, Madison. When court resumed, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about defending an inheritance anymore. It was about protecting their memory. The people who stayed, who chose me every single day, while Catherine and Marcus chose everything else. You okay? Patricia whispered, noting my straightened shoulders. Yes, I'm ready. You look like your grandfather on the bench right now. The afternoon brought witnesses who knew the truth. Dorothy Chen, the court clerk who'd worked with Benjamin for 3 decades, described his sharp mind and unwavering ethics until his final day. Dr. Harrison testified about Benjamin's excellent cognitive function right up to his death. Then Martha Wilson took the stand, our housekeeper of 25 years. Her silver hair was pulled into the same neat bun she wore while bandaging my scraped knees and teaching me to fold Benjamin's shirts. "Every Sunday," Martha said, her voice steady despite Vincent's aggressive questioning. Without fail, Miss Madison prepared Sunday dinner with Judge Cole. Even after she moved to her own apartment, even during law school finals, she'd cook his favorite pot roast. "And after Eleanor Cole passed away?" Patricia asked gently. Martha's eyes found mine across the courtroom. Miss Madison never missed a Sunday, not 1 in 10 years. She'd bring fresh flowers for the table, always those special flowers Eleanor loved. When they were in season, I blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Behind me, colleagues from the district attorney's office filled 3 rows of seats. People who'd watched me build cases against white-collar criminals now witnessed me defending the most personal case of my life. Vincent rose for cross-examination. Aggression thinly veiled as inquiry. "Martha, isn't it true that Madison Wright controlled who had access to Judge Cole in his final years?" "No, sir." Martha's response came without hesitation. "Judge Cole made his own decisions until the day he died. Miss Madison respected his wishes. That's all." Frustration flashed across Vincent's face. "Motion to strike the witness's personal opinions from the record." "Denied," Judge Cooper said, almost too quickly. "The witness is describing observed behaviors, not offering opinions." Vincent tried another angle. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss Judge Cole's journals as inadmissible hearsay." Judge Cooper removed his glasses, polishing them with deliberate slowness. Motion denied. "The journals constitute contemporaneous documentation and will remain in evidence." Catherine's face tightened. Marcus leaned close to whisper something urgent in her ear, his eyes darting toward the exit. But the strongest evidence came next. Benjamin's final handwritten letter, penned 1 week before his heart attack. The letter where he explained in his own precise handwriting why he'd changed his will a decade earlier. The decision wasn't made in haste or confusion, he'd written. It was made with complete clarity after watching for 20 years to see which family member understood the true meaning of the word family. Catherine's hands trembled as she accepted a glass of water from Vincent. For the first time since the trial began, I allowed myself to believe that truth might actually prevail against the elaborate fiction my biological parents had constructed. And, somewhere between the stack of financial records and decades of documented absence, I found something unexpected, the strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you belong, not because of whose blood runs through your veins, but because of whose values run through your heart. The Charleston Daily landed on my doorstep the next morning with a thud that echoed through my empty hallway. I didn't need to unfold it to know what I'd find. Catherine's face stared back from below the fold, carefully composed in tragic beauty. "Family Estate Battle Divides, Charleston Legacy," the headline screamed in bold print. I forced myself to read every word. Catherine described being systematically alienated from her father's affection. She wept about the calculated effort to turn Benjamin Cole against his only daughter. Not one word about the 4-month-old baby she'd abandoned with nothing but a handwritten note. My phone rang before I finished the article. "Madison Cole?" The voice was unfamiliar, harsh, speaking. "You should be ashamed. Stealing from your own mother like that." The line went dead. 3 more calls followed within the hour, all strangers, all convinced by Catherine's performance. By noon, my office voicemail overflowed with messages, questioning my integrity. The prosecutor who manipulated her elderly grandfather. The ungrateful daughter denying her parents their rightful inheritance. Their words burrowed under my skin like thorns. I stood at the window of what used to be Benjamin's study, now mine, watching rain beat against century-old glass. The garden lay dormant, waiting for warmer days to wake Eleanor's carefully tended flowers. My reflection stared back at me, shoulders slightly hunched in a posture Eleanor would have gently corrected. "Stand tall, Madison," she'd say. Like my flowers. They don't apologize for blooming. On the bookshelf behind me, leather-bound journals lined up like silent witnesses. I traced their spines, pausing at one bound in green fabric, Eleanor's gardening journal. I hadn't opened it since her death 3 years ago. Inside, her elegant handwriting detailed planting schedules and soil conditions. But in the margins, something else caught my eye. Life lessons written as if in conversation with the plants she tended. Flowers survive winter when everything appears dead, she'd written beside a sketch of crimson blooms. The strongest ones emerge from the coldest seasons. Remember this, Madison. My name, written in her hand, released something tight in my chest. On the desk sat another treasure, a leather notebook Benjamin had given me at my law school graduation. Inside the cover, his precise handwriting, "Ethics aren't situational, Madison. They're the foundation upon which justice stands." I remembered watching him on the bench during my summer internship, the experience that confirmed my path toward law. A defendant had accused him of bias. Benjamin hadn't flinched. "Justice isn't revenge," he told me afterward. "It's the restoration of truth. Truth." The words settled in my mind like an anchor in turbulent water. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin. Stand tall like the flowers. I would not dishonor their memory with bitterness or anger. I would honor it with truth. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation the following morning when court reconvened. Catherine took the witness stand, dabbing at manufactured tears with practiced precision. Her cashmere sweater, robin's egg blue, not navy, complemented her complexion perfectly. Every detail calculated for maximum sympathy. "My father abandoned me," she testified, her voice breaking with theatrical precision. "When Madison came along, it was as if I ceased to exist in his eyes." Vincent Parker guided her through carefully scripted testimony, each question designed to paint her as the victim. "Your relationship with your daughter?" "I tried," Catherine whispered, her voice trembling. "But Benjamin and Eleanor wouldn't allow it. They turned her against me from the beginning," the gallery murmured sympathetically. "I kept my face neutral, fingers pressed against Eleanor's pearl necklace beneath my collar, a grounding touch connecting me to truth." Patricia rose for cross-examination, a thick stack of documents in hand. Her accent thickened slightly, a tactical choice I'd learned to recognize. "Mrs. Wright, you testified that Judge Cole abandoned you. Is that correct?" "Yes." Catherine dabbed her eyes again. "I have here visitation logs from 1993 through 2008. Patricia approached the witness stand with measured steps. "Your signature appears on exactly 10 occasions over 15 years. 10 visits to your daughter in 15 years. Would you characterize that as maternal devotion?" Catherine's jaw tightened visibly. "Those logs don't show the times I was turned away." "Interesting." Patricia selected another document with deliberate care. "I also have emails from your account to Judge Cole. May 12, 2001, can't make Madison's recital. Send money for the Manhattan apartment deposit instead." She paused, letting the words sink in. December 23, 2006. "Christmas visit impossible this year. The Aspen house we're renting doesn't allow children." Another pause. More devastating. September 8, 2012. "Madison's high school graduation conflicts with our Mediterranean cruise." Each date hammered against the courtroom silence like nails in a coffin. Behind me, someone gasped audibly. "And this," Patricia displayed a document on the overhead screen, "is a handwritten note from Judge Cole's personal effects." Benjamin's precise handwriting filled the screen. Broken promises. Again. Madison waited by the window until midnight. "How do I explain this time?" The tears on Catherine's face were real now, but they were tears of anger. Not sorrow. The courtroom shifted subtly, like an ocean current changing direction beneath the surface. Martha Pullman took the stand next. Eleanor's housekeeper for 30 years, as much a part of my childhood as Sunday dinners. After Mrs. Cole passed, Martha testified, Miss Madison never missed a Sunday, not one. Even during law school finals, she'd drive from Duke on Saturday night help the judge with his medications, attend church with him Sunday morning, prepare dinner, and drive back. And the plaintiffs? Patricia asked gently. Martha's eyes found mine across the courtroom. Mrs. Wright called maybe twice a year, always about money. Mr. Wright? She sniffed disapprovingly. Never heard his voice in that house once. Neighbors followed. The Hendersons who watched me shovel Benjamin's walkway after every snowfall. Dr. Williams, who taught me to drive in the church parking lot when my parents forgot my 16th birthday. Professor Thompson, who supervised my law school thesis while I cared for Benjamin after his hip surgery. Judge Cooper's pen moved steadily across his legal pad. My mentor from Duke Law took the stand, and her testimony cut through Vincent's narrative like a blade through silk. Madison worked through weekends to maintain her class standing while visiting her grandfather every Sunday, Professor Reynolds testified. When other students took spring break trips, she drove to Charleston to help Judge Cole with his tax returns and medical appointments. Did she ever discuss inheritance expectations with you? Patricia asked. Never. Not once in 3 years. Benjamin's financial advisor confirmed I'd never inquired about the estate, never requested funds beyond my college tuition, which I'd insisted on repaying after graduation. The narrative shifted with each testimony, the courtroom's sympathy, flowing away from Catherine's performance toward the documented reality of 3 decades. During afternoon recess, Patricia touched my shoulder. Marcus's cross-examination is next. Are you ready? I nodded, watching my biological father across the courtroom. He straightened his tie repeatedly, avoiding eye contact with Catherine, whose earlier composure had crumbled into barely contained fury. When proceedings resumed, Marcus Wright took the stand. His expensive suit and carefully styled hair projected success, but his fingers drummed nervously against his thigh, a tell I recognized from years of prosecuting white-collar criminals. Patricia approached slowly, like a predator who knew its prey was already cornered. Mr. Wright, did you attend your daughter's graduations? Silence stretched across the courtroom like taffy. He cleared his throat. Which one? The gallery stirred. Someone coughed to cover an inappropriate laugh. Any of them, Patricia replied evenly. High school, college, law school? I was traveling for business, the standard excuse of my childhood, worn smooth from overuse. Where did Madison attend law school, Mr. Wright? His eyes darted toward Catherine, who stared stonily ahead, offering no lifeline. I believe it was. University of South Carolina? It was Duke University Law School, Patricia corrected. She graduated summa cum laude with honors in constitutional law. She paused, letting his ignorance hang in the air. Have you ever visited your daughter's home, Mr. Wright? The home you're currently suing her to take away? Another painful silence. Not recently. Have you ever visited it? No. The courtroom murmurs grew louder. Judge Cooper tapped his gavel once, a gentle warning. Marcus's disconnection from my life became starkly, painfully evident with each question. He didn't know my address, couldn't name a single friend, didn't recall ever sending a birthday gift. Across the room, Catherine's facade cracked further. Her knuckles whitened around her purse strap. The performance was failing. The audience was turning against her. I sat straight-backed, Eleanor's voice echoing in my mind. Stand tall like the flowers, Madison. The strongest ones emerge from the coldest winters. As the day drew to a close, Vincent Parker rose with unexpected energy, the kind that signaled a desperate play. Your Honor, we call Dr. Richard Morrison to the stand. An unfamiliar man. Walked forward, mid-60s, silver-haired, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a narrow nose. My stomach tightened. Who is that? I whispered to Patricia. Not in our witness disclosures, she murmured, flipping rapidly through documents. Vincent introduced him as Benjamin Cole's former physician, claiming he had critical testimony about my grandfather's mental state during his final years. Judge Cooper frowned deeply. This witness wasn't on your list, Counselor. Recent discovery, Your Honor. critical to establishing Judge Cole's vulnerability to undue influence. Patricia objected immediately, but Judge Cooper allowed limited testimony in the interest of complete examination. As Dr. Morrison settled into the witness chair, I noticed something familiar, a nervous habit of adjusting his glasses with his middle finger rather than his index finger. The same odd gesture I'd seen years ago at a medical conference where Benjamin spoke. "Don't worry," Patricia whispered. "Trust our preparation." I nodded, but my attention remained fixed on Dr. Morrison's hands. He adjusted his glasses again, middle finger pushing at the bridge. A memory surfaced. Eleanor's voice, gentle but firm. "Remember, Madison, truth doesn't need rehearsal." I leaned forward, studying the doctor's nervous mannerisms as he began speaking about memory issues and suggestibility in elderly patients. There was something else familiar here, something I couldn't quite place. Judge Cooper watched the witness with narrowed eyes, his expression unreadable. The courtroom held its collective breath, and suddenly, I knew exactly who this man was, and why Vincent Parker had hidden him from disclosure until the last possible moment. The trap was set, but they didn't know I'd already seen through it. Dr. Morrison adjusted his bow tie with trembling fingers, clearly uncomfortable despite Vincent Parker's coaching. "Dr. Morrison, how long did you treat Judge Benjamin Cole?" Vincent's voice carried false sincerity. Morrison cleared his throat. "I saw Judge Cole twice in the months before his passing. And during those visits, did you observe any signs suggesting Judge Cole was being manipulated?" My muscles tensed. Patricia placed her hand over mine beneath the table, a gentle warning to maintain composure. "Objection," Patricia stated, her accent more pronounced. "Calls for speculation." Judge Cooper's eyebrows drew together. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Parker." Morrison nodded eagerly, like a student trying to please a teacher. "Yes, I observed several concerning signs. The judge seemed confused about finances. He mentioned feeling pressured regarding estate decisions." Catherine nodded theatrically, her handkerchief making another calculated appearance. Patricia rose slowly, buttoning her jacket with deliberate calm that signaled incoming destruction. "Dr. Morrison, you mentioned seeing Judge Cole twice. Would you share the specific dates?" "March 12th and April 3rd of last year." "And what was your relationship with Judge Cole before these appointments?" Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "I hadn't treated him previously." "So you weren't his primary physician?" "No, but when did you open your practice in Charleston, Dr. Morrison?" 8 months ago." "And with whom did you establish this practice?" Vincent stood quickly. "Objection, relevance." "Goes to credibility, Your Honor," Patricia responded smoothly. "Overruled. The witness will answer." Morrison's collar suddenly seemed too tight. "With Dr. Thomas Reynolds." "And what is Dr. Reynolds' relationship to Catherine Wright?" The courtroom stirred like leaves before a storm. Morrison's gaze darted toward Catherine before answering. "He's her cousin." Patricia nodded once, retrieving a thick file from our table. "I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit 43, Your Honor. These are Judge Cole's complete medical records from his primary physician of 30 years, Dr. Harold Simmons." Vincent launched to his feet. "Objection! Those records weren't provided during discovery." "They absolutely were, Your Honor." Patricia didn't even glance at Vincent. "Page 211 of our disclosure packet, submitted 2 months ago." Judge Cooper leafed through a folder on his bench. "Objection overruled. Records were properly disclosed." Patricia approached Morrison with the medical records. "These records show Dr. Simmons performed a complete cognitive assessment of Judge Cole just 1 week after your second appointment. Would you please read his conclusion on page 4, paragraph 2? Morrison's voice wavered as he read. "Cognitive function remains sharp and consistent with previous evaluations. Patient demonstrates excellent recall of recent and distant events. No evidence of confusion or impairment in decision-making capacity." "Thank you, Dr. Morrison." Patricia placed another document before him. Now, could you explain this prescription you wrote for Judge Cole during your second visit? Morrison paled visibly. It's for a mild sedative. Was this medication requested by Judge Cole? Not exactly. Who suggested this medication, Dr. Morrison? His eyes flickered toward Catherine again, a fatal tell. Mrs. Wright expressed concern about her father's anxiety. Yet Dr. Simmons's notes from the following week indicate Judge Cole reported no anxiety symptoms whatsoever. Interesting. Patricia turned toward the bench. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor. Vincent tried redirect examination, but each question only deepened the hole. Morrison's testimony had unraveled beyond repair, exposing the manufactured evidence for exactly what it was. Catherine scribbled furious notes, passing them to Vincent, who barely glanced at them before sighing heavily. Marcus leaned toward Catherine, whispering something that made her face flush crimson. They were fracturing, each blaming the other for the collapsing case. The defense calls Madison Cole, Patricia announced. Taking the stand felt surreal, like watching myself from outside my body. I adjusted my collar, grateful for the extra starch Martha had insisted on that morning. That judge needs to see you're solid as bedrock, she'd said while pressing it. After I was sworn in, Patricia approached with quiet confidence. Miss Cole, there have been insinuations that you manipulated your grandfather for financial gain. If that were true, wouldn't there have been easier ways to secure his money than spending every Sunday for 30 years at his dinner table? Yes. My voice came out steadier than expected. I'm a prosecutor with a comfortable salary. If I'd wanted his money, I wouldn't have spent 3 decades of Sundays listening to his stories about cases from 1972. Quiet. Chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Did the Sunday dinner tradition change after your grandmother passed away? I swallowed around sudden thickness in my throat. Only in one way. I started bringing the lemon bundt cake instead of her making it. Everything else stayed the same. 6 o'clock, sharp classical music on the radio, grandfather's stories. And why did you maintain this tradition? The answer was simple, honest, true. I stayed because I loved him. Because showing up for people you love isn't manipulation. It's family. Vincent stood for cross-examination. His confidence visibly diminished since morning. Miss Cole, isn't it true you influenced your grandfather's decision to change his will after your grandmother's death? No. His will was changed 10 years ago when grandmother was still alive. They made the decision together. But you discussed the will with him? He discussed it with me. He was a judge for 40 years, Mr. Parker. Nobody influenced Benjamin Cole to do anything he didn't believe was right. Vincent tried another angle. You were aware of the contents of the will? Yes. Grandfather believed in transparency. He showed me the will and explained that he and grandmother had decided to leave their estate to me rather than to parents who had chosen not to be part of my life. From the gallery, I heard several people murmuring in agreement. Judge Cooper made no move to silence them. My boss, District Attorney Robert Langston, took the stand next, his imposing frame making the witness chair look small. I've supervised Madison Cole for 6 years, he stated without prompting. She's prosecuted financial crimes worth millions. If there were a prosecutor in my office I'd trust with my own estate planning, it would be her. Her integrity is beyond reproach. Judge Cooper nodded, then spoke directly from the bench, an unusual move that made Vincent tense. I've known Benjamin Cole for nearly 30 years. He mentored me when I joined the judiciary. In all that time, I never once saw him make a decision that wasn't thoroughly considered and ethically sound. Vincent's objection came too late and without conviction. Judge Cooper simply noted it for the record without acknowledging it further. During afternoon recess, I stepped into the hallway for air and overheard Marcus's harsh whisper to Catherine near the water fountain. You pushed this too far, Catherine. Morrison was a complete disaster. How was I supposed to know they'd have those records? Thomas said. Your whole family talks big, but delivers nothing. Catherine spotted me and fell silent, pulling Marcus away by his sleeve. When court reconvened, Vincent requested a conference with Patricia. They spoke in hushed tones before approaching the bench together. After a brief discussion with Judge Cooper, they returned to their tables. Patricia leaned close. "They're offering to drop the suit if you'll pay their legal fees." I shook my head once. "No," she squeezed my hand approvingly. "Good. That's what I told them." Catherine sat ramrod straight at the plaintiff's table, but the cracks in her facade had widened into chasms. Her cousin, seated 3 rows back, stared fixedly at his shoes rather than meeting Morrison's questioning gaze. Judge Cooper cleared his throat, commanding instant silence. "Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I'm prepared to issue a ruling unless counsel has additional witnesses." Vincent rose slowly. "No additional witnesses, Your Honor." "Very well." Judge Cooper's gaze swept the courtroom before settling on me, and for just a moment, I saw Benjamin's influence in his expression. "Sometimes the law is complicated," he began. "This case is not." Judge Cooper's words fell like hammers of justice. The evidence clearly shows that Benjamin Cole was of sound mind when he executed his will, and that his intentions were deliberate and informed. He had 30 years to observe which family member understood the meaning of family. His choice was not made in confusion or under pressure. It was made with clarity. He turned toward Catherine and Marcus, his expression hardening. The plaintiffs have failed to provide any credible evidence of undue influence or diminished capacity. Furthermore, their attempt to introduce a witness with undisclosed conflicts of interest borders on misconduct. Vincent's face flushed crimson. "The claim is dismissed with prejudice," Judge Cooper continued. "Additionally, the plaintiffs shall pay the defendants reasonable attorney fees as permitted under state law for frivolous lawsuits filed without substantial justification." The gavel struck, sharp, final, unmistakable. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed through my chest like a second heartbeat. Only then did I allow tears to fall, not for the inheritance secured or the lawsuit defeated, but for the validation of a truth I'd always known. Family isn't determined by blood running through veins. It's determined by feet that walk toward you when others walk away. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. "Justice served. Your grandfather would be proud." I nodded, unable to speak past the knot in my throat. The courtroom emptied slowly, murmurs fading like receding tides. Catherine and Marcus rose quickly, avoiding my gaze as they followed Vincent through the side door. No final words. No acknowledgement. Just departure. The one consistent action they'd shown throughout my life. Colleagues from the district attorney's office surrounded me with quiet congratulations. Martha appeared with tissues and a thermos of her famous sweet tea. "Knew you'd need this," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But the day wasn't quite finished. As I gathered my things, Catherine appeared in the hallway outside the third-floor bathroom. Her Chanel perfume created an invisible barrier between us, Madison. Her voice lacked the practiced warmth she'd used in the courtroom. Straightened my jacket, a shield against whatever manipulation came. "Next, what do you want, Catherine? This doesn't have to be the end." She stepped closer, diamond earrings catching fluorescent light. "You might have the law on your side, but I have your blood." The word blood hung between us like an accusation. "Would your grandmother want this?" Catherine whispered, her perfectly manicured hand reaching toward my arm, but stopping short of contact. Eleanor was all about family unity, about forgiveness. My throat tightened at the casual invocation of Eleanor's name. Catherine barely knew her own mother in adulthood, visiting less than once a year, while I helped Eleanor tend her garden every Saturday for 27 years. "We could end this today," Catherine continued, misreading my silence as hesitation. "I'm willing to forgive and forget everything if you'll simply split the inheritance. 50-50. That's fair, isn't it? Mother and daughter sharing equally?" Her eyes, identical to mine in shape and color, scanned my face for weakness, for the little girl who once waited by the mailbox for cards that rarely came. "Think about the community," she pressed. "Everyone's talking. Pastor Richards called me yesterday, concerned about this family division." I almost laughed. Pastor Richards had called me too. His concern genuine after 3 decades of watching me sit beside Benjamin in the 4th pew every Easter Sunday while my parents remained phantom. Figures, the Charleston Daily is running another piece next week, Catherine added, her voice taking on a threatening edge. Family against family. Is that the legacy you want? What about the Cole family reputation? Before I could answer, Vincent Parker rounded the corner with his leather briefcase, nodding curtly to Catherine. Judge Cooper's clerk just filed the final order. You have 30 days to pay the attorney fees. Catherine's face contorted with barely contained rage. This isn't over. Actually, I said, finding my voice at last. It is. I looked directly at Catherine, really looked at her, and felt nothing but pity. You talk about blood like it's some magical bond that erases 32 years of absence. But blood didn't show up to my kindergarten graduation. Blood didn't teach me to ride a bike or braid my hair. Blood didn't sit with me through pneumonia or celebrate my acceptance to Duke. My voice remained steady, calm. Benjamin's voice, Eleanor's strength. Eleanor and Benjamin stayed. They chose me every single day. That's not manipulation, Catherine. That's love. And you wouldn't recognize love if it wore a name tag. Catherine's composure shattered completely. You ungrateful— No, I interrupted. I'm incredibly grateful. Just not to you. I walked past her toward the elevator, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, exactly as she'd left me 32 years ago. 6 months later, I stood in Benjamin's study, my study now, watching morning light filter through century-old windows onto Eleanor's restored garden. The hibiscus flowers bloomed in riots of crimson and gold, tended now by my hands following Eleanor's careful instructions from her journals. The nameplate arrived that morning. The Honorable Madison Cole, Circuit Court Judge. At 33, I was South Carolina's youngest appointed judge, a position Benjamin had once held, now passed not through blood, but through values, through integrity, through the lessons of 1,000 Sunday dinners. Martha knocked softly on the doorframe. Your first day jitters showing yet? Terrified, I admitted with a smile. Good. Your grandfather used to say the day you stop being nervous is the day you stop caring. She placed a slice of lemon bundt cake on my desk. Saturday morning tradition continued. Eleanor would burst with pride. The cake tasted exactly like childhood, like safety, like home. My first case as a judge was, perhaps inevitably, another inheritance dispute. Another family fractured by claims of manipulation and undue influence. Another daughter accused of turning an elderly parent against their biological children. But this time, I sat on the bench. The plaintiff's attorney, a younger man than Vincent Parker but equally confident, gestured dramatically toward his client. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson's mother clearly favored the defendant, her granddaughter Sarah, due to calculated manipulation over many years. I studied the case file, hospital records showing Sarah at every doctor's appointment, school records listing her grandmother as emergency contact when Mrs. Patterson never answered calls, photographs spanning 20 years with Sarah present and Mrs. Patterson absent. The pattern was painfully, intimately familiar. During a recess, I watched Mrs. Patterson refresh her makeup in the hallway. The same practiced gestures Catherine had used, the same performance of grief, without genuine remorse. When testimony resumed, the granddaughter Sarah took the stand. 26 years old, a teacher, visibly exhausted from caring for her grandmother through final illness while her mother circled the estate like a vulture. Why did you spend every weekend at your grandmother's house? The defense attorney asked. Sarah's answer was simple. Because she raised me. Because my mother dropped me there when I was 3 and never came back. Because love isn't about DNA, it's about who shows up. I saw myself in her eyes. The same mixture of pain and strength. The same quiet certainty born from decades of being chosen by someone who didn't have to choose you. The plaintiff's attorney objected, Your Honor, this is irrelevant emotional testimony. Overruled, I said firmly. Family dynamics are absolutely relevant to determining undue influence. Continue, Miss Harrison. By the end of the day, the evidence was overwhelming. Mrs. Patterson had maintained minimal contact for 23 years, while her daughter Sarah provided daily care, love, and presence. I delivered my ruling the following afternoon. This court finds no evidence of undue influence or manipulation. The evidence shows a grandmother who made a conscious, informed choice to leave her estate to the granddaughter who acted as her true family for over 2 decades. I looked directly at Mrs. Patterson. Blood relation does not automatically confer either love or inheritance. Those are earned through presence, through sacrifice, through the daily choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The gavel fell. Case dismissed. Sarah Harrison. Burst into tears, relief, vindication, grief, all tangled together. Her grandmother had died 3 months earlier, and now at least her final wishes would be honored. After court adjourned, Sarah approached the bench hesitantly. "Thank you, Your Honor. I was so afraid—" "I know," I said quietly. "I've been exactly where you are." Understanding flickered in her eyes. She'd followed my case in the newspapers, recognized the parallels. "It gets easier," I told her. "Not because the pain disappears, but because you learn to carry it differently. You learn that their absence says everything about them and nothing about your worth." She nodded, wiping tears. "Your grandparents would be proud of you." After she left, I sat alone in the courtroom, Benjamin's courtroom once, now mine, and felt their presence like sunlight through stained glass. That evening, my chosen family gathered around the dining table. Not blood relations, but the people who'd shown up consistently for years. Patricia Hughes, my attorney-turned-friend, who'd fought for me when it mattered most. Martha Wilson, who'd bandaged skinned knees and taught me that family is built through daily small acts of love. Robert Langston, my boss and mentor, who testified to my integrity when others questioned it. Professor Reynolds from Duke, who'd encouraged me to pursue the judgeship when I doubted myself. And a dozen others, colleagues, neighbors, friends, who'd filled the space Catherine and Marcus left empty. We ate pot roast and lemon bundt cake. We told stories about Benjamin and Eleanor. We laughed until tears ran down our faces. This was family. Not perfect, not bound by DNA, but present, consistent, real. Later that night, I drove to Magnolia Cemetery. As sunset painted the weathered tombstones gold and rose, I knelt between 2 graves, placing fresh hibiscus blooms against pale marble. "I kept my promise," I whispered to Eleanor's headstone, laying a slice of lemon cake wrapped in wax paper. "I protected what you built." Wind rustled through ancient oaks overhead, carrying the scent of flowers and rain. "The Patterson case ended today," I told Benjamin's grave. "Same story as ours, really. But this time, I got to make sure truth won from the beginning. That granddaughter won't spend years defending her worth the way I did." A cardinal landed on a nearby branch, brilliant red against darkening sky. Eleanor used to say cardinals were visits from people we'd lost, checking on us from wherever they'd gone. "I miss you both," I said, "every single day, but I'm not alone. You made sure of that by teaching me what real family looks like." I rose, brushing grass from my skirt. Their legacy continued, not just in property or possessions, but in every fair ruling, every child protected, every truth honored from my bench. "Family is who stays," I whispered, walking toward home. I should have known Catherine wouldn't disappear quietly. 18 months after the trial, a letter arrived at my courthouse chambers. Cream-colored stationery, my name in elegant calligraphy. The return address made my stomach drop. Catherine Wright. Inside, 3 pages of carefully crafted words. "Dear Madison, I've spent the past year in therapy, working through the mistakes I made as a young mother. I realize now that abandoning you was the greatest regret of my life. I'm writing not to ask for money or forgiveness, but simply for a chance to know my daughter." The words were pretty, practiced, precisely calculated to sound genuine. I set the letter aside and didn't respond. 2 weeks later, Catherine appeared at Trinity Church on Sunday morning, the first time she'd attended a service there in 33 years. She sat 3 pews behind me, dressed in understated elegance, dabbing at her eyes during the sermon about forgiveness and family reconciliation. Pastor Richards approached me after service. "Madison, your mother mentioned she's trying to reconnect. It's wonderful to see families healing." I smiled tightly. "Catherine Wright attended church today because I'm here. She'll be gone next week." Sure enough, the following Sunday, Catherine's pew sat empty. But her campaign continued in subtler ways. She joined the Charleston Historical Society, a group I'd belonged to for 5 years, volunteering to preserve Benjamin's beloved city history. She donated generously to the law school scholarship fund in Eleanor's name, after never contributing $1 while Eleanor was alive. She attended charity galas where she knew I'd be present, always positioning herself nearby, always mentioning her regret and desire to rebuild bridges to anyone who'd listen. The social pressure mounted gradually. Well-meaning friends and colleagues gently suggested that perhaps Catherine had changed, that perhaps reconciliation was worth considering. "People make mistakes when they're young," one judge told me over lunch. "Your mother seems genuinely remorseful." "My mother," I replied carefully, "is genuinely interested in rehabilitating her reputation now that the inheritance battle made her look bad." But doubt crept in during quiet moments. What if she had changed? What if therapy had genuinely helped her understand her failures? What if I was being unreasonably harsh? Then Martha found Catherine's social media posts. "You need to see this," Martha said, her tablet showing Catherine's Instagram account. Photo after photo showed Catherine at charity events, historical society meetings, church services, always with captions mentioning her estranged daughter, the judge, and her journey toward healing family wounds. One post showed her holding Eleanor's published obituary, "Missing my mother today." Regret is a heavy burden. Praying my daughter Madison will someday understand that forgiveness heals both parties. She'd turned her abandonment into a redemption narrative, with herself as the reformed sinner seeking absolution from her unreasonably cold daughter. "She's rewriting history," Martha said flatly, making herself the victim again. The breaking point came during a courthouse dedication ceremony. The county was naming the new family court wing after Benjamin Cole, a tremendous honor recognizing his 40 years of service. I was scheduled to give the keynote speech. Catherine appeared at the ceremony, seated in the front row beside the mayor. When I approached the podium, she smiled up at me. The same calculated expression I'd seen in the courtroom, the same performance of maternal pride she'd never actually felt. I looked at the assembled crowd, Benjamin's former colleagues, law students, community leaders, people who'd known Benjamin, who'd understood his values, and I made a choice. "Judge Benjamin Cole," I began, "taught me that integrity means telling the truth even when lies would be more convenient." I saw Catherine's smile falter slightly. "He taught me that family is defined not by who claims you, but by who shows up for you, who stays through the difficult moments, the boring moments, the moments when there's nothing to gain but the privilege of loving someone." I looked directly at Catherine. My grandfather never abandoned anyone, but he also never tolerated dishonesty, manipulation, or the rewriting of history for personal gain. Catherine's face flushed. But she maintained her composure. Barely. "This family court wing will serve children whose parents have failed them, temporarily or permanently. It will determine who deserves custody, who deserves access, who has truly earned the title of parent." My voice strengthened. Judge Cole believed that title, like love, like family, must be earned through action, not claimed through biology. This building stands as a monument to that principle. The applause was thunderous. Catherine left before the reception. Her exit swift and silent. She never contacted me again. 3 years after becoming a judge, I found a letter I'd never seen before. Martha was cleaning out. Eleanor's sewing room, a task we'd been avoiding since her death, when she discovered a wooden box hidden behind fabric bolts. Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to me, all written by Eleanor during the final year of her life. She was saving them, Martha said softly, planning to give them to you at different moments. Your wedding day, your first child, difficult times. I opened the first envelope with trembling hands. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're facing a moment when you need your grandmother's voice. I wish I could be there in person, but these words will have to suffice. I want to tell you about the day Catherine left you with us. You were 4 months old, barely bigger than a loaf of bread. She arrived without warning, placed your carrier on our doorstep and said, "I can't do this." She's yours now. My first emotion wasn't anger, it was terror. Your grandfather and I were in our 60s. We'd raised our child and buried our dreams of grandchildren after Catherine made clear she wanted nothing to do with parenthood or us. But then you started crying, that particular newborn wail that demands attention, and I picked you up and you stopped. You looked at me with those enormous gray eyes, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Your grandfather held you that first night while I prepared formula, neither of us having any idea what we were doing. "Eleanor," he said, "I think we just became parents again." I laughed until I cried because it was terrifying and perfect and absolutely not what we'd planned. That's what real family is, Madison. It's not what you plan. It's what you choose when life presents you with someone who needs you. I read through tears, Eleanor's words washing over me like a benediction. Other letters contained practical advice about marriage, career, handling difficult people. Some contained recipes with notes in the margins. Make this when you're sad. Butter makes everything better. But one letter, dated 3 months before Eleanor died, held the words I needed most. Catherine will try to come back someday. Not for you, but for what you represent. Success, respectability, a chance to rewrite her story. When that day comes, remember this. You don't owe anyone access to your life simply because they share your DNA. Family is earned through presence, through sacrifice, through love demonstrated in 1,000 small ways over decades. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can forgive Catherine for being unable to love you without allowing her back into your life. Forgiveness is releasing your own anger, not opening your door to someone who hurt you. Your grandfather and I didn't save you, Madison. You saved us. You gave our lives meaning when we thought that chapter was closed. You were never a burden. You were a gift. Stand tall, my darling girl. Like the flowers I taught you to grow. The strongest ones survive the coldest winters and bloom more brilliantly because of what they endured. I love you. I always have. I always will. Your grandmother Eleanor. I sat on the floor of the sewing room, surrounded by letters and memories, and finally allowed myself to grieve completely. Not for Catherine and Marcus. I'd long since accepted they would never be what I needed. But for Benjamin and Eleanor, whose absence still ached like a phantom limb. For the childhood that could have been easier if my biological parents had chosen differently. For the years I'd spent wondering if I was somehow unlovable, somehow defective. Martha sat beside me on the floor, her arm around my shoulders, letting me cry without trying to fix anything. They knew, she said quietly. They knew you'd need these words someday. That evening, I returned to the cemetery with all of Eleanor's letters and a blanket. I sat between their graves as sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, reading each letter aloud as if they could hear me. Maybe they could. Maybe love creates connections that transcend death. Maybe the lessons they taught me had become so fundamental to who I was that they lived on through every decision I made. Thank you, I said to the gathering darkness, for staying, for choosing me, for teaching me what family really means. A cardinal appeared on Benjamin's headstone, Eleanor's sign of visitation. I'm okay, I told them. Better than okay. Because of you, I know how to build family from choice rather than obligation. Because of you, I know my worth isn't determined by who abandoned me, but by who chose to stay. The cardinal tilted its head, as if listening. I'm going to be okay, I repeated, more firmly. And I'm going to make sure other kids in my courtroom are okay too. Kids whose parents failed them. Kids who need someone to see them, really see them, and protect their right to be loved by people who actually want to love them. The bird flew away, but peace remained. 5 years after becoming a judge, I was asked to speak at a family law conference about childhood abandonment cases. The auditorium held 300 attorneys, social workers, and judges, all dealing with fractured families, custody battles, and children caught in adult wars. I stood at the podium, looking at the sea of faces, and made a choice to tell the truth. My name is Madison Cole, and I was abandoned by my biological parents when I was 4 months old. The room fell completely silent. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because children who come through your courtrooms need advocates who understand that family isn't always found where biology says it should be. Told them about Benjamin and Eleanor, not the sanitized version, but the real story. The terror of 2 people in their 60s suddenly caring for an infant. The financial strain. The social judgment. The exhausting early years, but also the love. The fierce, protective, chosen love that defined my entire childhood. When my biological parents sued for my inheritance, they claimed I'd manipulated my grandfather. The truth was simpler and harder to accept. He'd observed for 30 years which family member understood what family meant. I told them about Sunday dinners, about lemon bundt cake, about hibiscus gardens, and the quiet lessons taught through presence rather than words. In your courtrooms, you'll meet children whose biological parents demand custody based solely on DNA. You'll meet grandparents, foster parents, step-parents, and others who've earned the title parent through action rather than genetics. My voice strengthened. Your job, our job, is to look past the claims and examine the evidence. Who showed up? Who stayed? Who sacrificed? Who loved consistently even when it was difficult? I shared statistics about cases I'd handled. Children awarded to grandparents over absent parents. Foster families granted permanent custody. Step-parents given rights that biological parents had forfeited through abandonment. Every single one of these decisions is controversial. Every single one generates angry letters claiming I'm destroying families or ignoring blood bonds. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. But I sleep well at night because I know those children are safe with people who genuinely want them, not with people who view them as possessions or sources of income. The standing ovation that followed lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, dozens of attorneys approached me. Many shared their own stories: adopted children, raised by grandparents, saved by non-biological family members who stepped in when biological ones failed. You're giving voice to something we all know but struggle to articulate in court, one attorney said. Biology isn't destiny. That conference speech changed something in my career. Requests for speaking engagements flooded in. Law schools invited me to lecture. Family law textbooks cited my rulings as precedent for prioritizing demonstrated commitment over biological claims. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. Sarah Harrison, the young woman whose grandmother's estate case had been my first as a judge, contacted my office 6 years later. She'd become a family law attorney herself, inspired by her own case and my ruling. I want to fight for kids like us, she wrote. Kids who were saved by people who didn't have to save them but chose to anyway. We met for coffee, and she told me about her work representing grandparents seeking custody, foster families fighting biological parents, children advocating for themselves in court. Your case gave me permission to tell the truth about my childhood, she said. To stop pretending my mother was a real parent just because she gave birth to me. The truth is powerful, I agreed. Even when it's painful, especially. When it's painful, she corrected. She told me about a case she'd just won. A grandmother granted full custody of her grandson after the biological mother abandoned him repeatedly, always returning when she needed money or wanted to play house temporarily. The mother's attorney argued that blood trumps everything, that mothers deserve infinite chances. What did you argue? I asked. I quoted your ruling from my case. Blood relation does not automatically confer love or inheritance. Those are earned through presence, through sacrifice, through the daily choice to stay when leaving would be easier. Tears pricked my eyes. That little boy is safe now, Sarah continued, because you established legal precedent that choice matters more than biology. This was Benjamin's legacy, Eleanor's legacy, not just property or money, but values that rippled outward, protecting children neither of them would ever meet. 8 years after the trial, Martha called me at the courthouse with urgency in her voice. "Madison, someone's here to see you, says it's important. Can it wait until—" It's Marcus, my biological father, the man who hadn't spoken to me in nearly a decade. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I found him sitting in Benjamin's study, my study, looking diminished somehow. Older than 57 should look. Tired. Martha hovered near the door protectively. "It's okay, Martha," I said quietly. "You can stay if you'd like." She nodded, taking a seat in the corner. Marcus stood awkwardly. "Madison, thank you for seeing me." I didn't offer false pleasantries. "What do you want, Marcus?" He winced at the use of his first name rather than any paternal title. "I'm dying." He said it flatly, without drama. "Pancreatic cancer. 4 to 6 months, they say." I felt nothing. No grief, no satisfaction, just empty acknowledgement. "I'm sorry," I said, because it seemed like the thing to say. "I'm not here for sympathy." He sat back down heavily. "I'm here because I owe you the truth, the whole truth." Martha's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Marcus pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Catherine planned the lawsuit from the moment your grandfather died. She'd been planning it for years, actually, waiting for him to pass." He opened the folder, revealing documents, emails, financial records. "She convinced me it was our right, that you'd stolen what should have been ours. But the truth is—" He swallowed hard. "The truth is, we abandoned you, and Benjamin and Eleanor saved you. Everything that attorney said in court was true." I remained silent, letting him continue. "Catherine and I were young when you were born, 23 and 25. We were broke, living in a tiny apartment in New York, trying to make it as artists. When you came along, we panicked." His voice cracked. "We told ourselves we were doing the right thing, leaving you with people who could provide for you. But that was a lie. The right thing would have been growing up ourselves, being your parents." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. 8 years later, when you're dying?" "Because Catherine is planning to contest your grandfather's legacy again. She's found a legal loophole, something about challenging judicial rulings after a certain period. I don't understand all of it, but her new attorney seems confident." My stomach dropped. "She's been collecting evidence that you unduly influenced Judge Cooper during the original trial, trying to prove some connection between you and Cooper that would invalidate his ruling." Martha stood abruptly. "That's insane. Madison never even met Judge Cooper before the trial." Marcus nodded. "I know, but Catherine has become obsessed. She's spent the past 8 years building this case, convinced she can still get the money." He pulled out another document, Catherine's medical records. "She's also unwell, mentally. The therapist she claimed to be seeing for our reconciliation attempts? That was a lie. She's been seeing someone, but for paranoid delusions. She's convinced you and Benjamin conspired against her somehow, that everything was a calculated plot." I sank into Benjamin's desk chair. "Why are you betraying her by telling me this?" Marcus met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine emotion there. "Because I'm trying to do one decent thing before I die. One thing you might remember that wasn't completely selfish or cowardly." He stood to leave. "I was a terrible father. I can't change that. But I can warn you that Catherine is coming, and she's not rational anymore. Protect yourself, Madison. You've built something good here. Don't let her destroy it." "Marcus," I said as he reached the door. "Why now? Why didn't you stop her 8 years ago?" He turned back, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Because 8 years ago, I still believed we deserved that money. I still believed biology meant something. But watching you become a judge, reading about your cases, seeing the work you do. He shook his head. You're exactly who Benjamin and Eleanor raised you to be, and Catherine and I would have destroyed that if we'd been your parents. He left without waiting for a response. Martha and I sat in silence for a long moment. Do you believe him? She finally asked. About Catherine's plans? Yes, about his motives? I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe dying makes people want to balance their books before they go. What will you do? I pulled out my phone and called Patricia Hughes. Patricia, I need you to file a restraining order and preemptive legal motions. Catherine Wright is planning another attack, and this time we're not waiting for her to strike first. Catherine's second lawsuit arrived 6 weeks after Marcus's visit. She'd filed in federal court this time, claiming that Judge Cooper had violated judicial ethics by ruling on a case involving someone connected to his mentor. She demanded the original verdict be overturned and the estate case be retried, but Patricia had been preparing. We filed first, she said with satisfaction. Motion for sanctions against Catherine and her attorney for repeated frivolous litigation, plus a restraining order preventing further legal action. The federal judge assigned to the case was Judge Maria Santos, a no-nonsense jurist with a reputation for despising attorneys who wasted her time. The hearing lasted less than 2 hours. Catherine's attorney, a desperate-looking man who clearly regretted taking this case, tried to argue that new evidence suggested impropriety in the original trial. What evidence? Judge Santos demanded. He fumbled with papers. Well, Your Honor, there's documented communication between Judge Cooper and Judge Cole. They were colleagues for 30 years, Judge Santos interrupted. That's not evidence of impropriety. That's evidence they were both judges in the same circuit. But Judge Cooper should have recused himself. Based on what? Professional respect for a deceased colleague? Judge Santos's tone could have frozen lava. Counselor, are you seriously arguing that any judge who ever respected Benjamin Cole should have been disqualified from this case? The attorney wisely remained silent. Patricia stood. Your Honor, if I may present counter-evidence. She displayed Catherine's social media posts, her attempted manipulations during the reconciliation period, emails she'd sent to other family court judges trying to undermine my rulings, and, most damning, messages from Catherine to friends explicitly stating her plan to destroy Madison's career if I can't get the money. Judge Santos's expression darkened with each piece of evidence. Mrs. Wright, she said directly to Catherine, this court has seen many things, but rarely such a sustained campaign of harassment disguised as legal action. Catherine stood, trying to maintain dignity. Your Honor, I'm simply a mother trying to— You're not a mother, Judge Santos interrupted coldly. You're a plaintiff who abandoned her infant, ignored her for 32 years, sued her for an inheritance, lost conclusively, and are now attempting to use the legal system to harass her. She turned to Catherine's attorney. Motion denied. Furthermore, I'm imposing sanctions of $50,000 against Mrs. Wright and $25,000 against you, counselor, for bringing a frivolous case that wastes this court's time. The gavel fell. Additionally, I'm issuing a permanent injunction. Mrs. Wright, you are hereby barred from filing any further legal action related to the Cole estate, Judge Cole's will, or Judge Madison Cole's career. Any violation will result in contempt charges and possible jail time. Catherine's face went white, then red, then white again. This hearing is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. The case had attracted media attention as a follow-up to the original trial. Judge Cole, how do you feel about this? Ruling? I looked directly at the cameras and chose my words carefully. I feel relief that the legal system has finally put an end to harassment disguised as legitimate legal action. More importantly, I hope this case serves as precedent that will protect other children whose estranged parents view them as financial assets rather than human beings. Do you have anything to say to Catherine Wright? I paused, thinking of Eleanor's letter about forgiveness. I forgive her for being unable to love me. I don't forgive the repeated attempts to harm me out of spite. But I'm done wasting energy on anger. She's not worth it. Catherine pushed through the crowd toward me, her face contorted with rage. You smug little... Martha stepped between us, all 5'2" of protective fury. Back off, Catherine. You lost. Go home. Catherine looked at me with something between hatred and desperate pleading. You stole my life, she whispered. My parents, my inheritance, everything. No, I said quietly. I lived the life you abandoned. There's a difference. She turned and walked away, and I knew, finally, truly knew, that I would never see her again. Marcus died 3 weeks later. His obituary listed no children. His funeral was small. I didn't attend, but I sent flowers with a simple card. Thank you for the warning. Rest in peace. Catherine disappeared from Charleston entirely. The last. I heard she'd moved to California, trying to reinvent herself yet again. I didn't care. She'd become irrelevant to my life. A biological footnote. Nothing more. 10 years after becoming a judge, I officiated a wedding in the garden behind Benjamin's house. My house now, though it would always belong to them in my heart. The couple getting married were Sarah Harrison and her partner, the attorney I'd inspired and a fellow advocate for children in difficult custody situations. Flowers bloomed everywhere, including the hibiscus Eleanor had planted decades ago. Martha had tended them faithfully, expanding the garden each year. Eleanor would love this, Martha whispered, as we watched Sarah walk down an aisle formed by flowering plants. A wedding in her garden. After the ceremony, during the reception, Sarah approached me with champagne and tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. For the ruling that protected my grandmother's wishes. For the example you set. For showing me that family is choice. You did the hard work yourself, I told her. I just recognized what was already true. An older woman joined us, Sarah's grandmother's sister, the aunt who'd supported her throughout her custody battle. Judge Cole, she said warmly, Sarah tells me your story is similar to hers. Very similar, I agreed. Then you understand how grateful families like ours are for judges who see clearly, who don't automatically assume biology trumps everything. I thought about the hundreds of cases I'd heard over a decade. Children removed from biological parents who harmed them. Foster families granted permanency. Grandparents awarded custody. Step-parents given parental rights. Each case was a small vindication of the lesson Benjamin and Eleanor taught me. Family is built through action, not accident. That evening after the wedding guests left, I sat alone in the garden watching fireflies dance among the flowers. My phone showed notifications, 3 more speaking requests, 2 legal journals asking for articles, a message from a law student writing a thesis on family court precedents. But I silenced it all and simply sat in the peace Eleanor had created. We did okay, didn't we? I said to the empty air, to the ghosts of the people who'd saved me. All those Sundays, all those dinners, all those little moments, they mattered. A cardinal landed on the garden bench beside me. I know, I told the bird. You're checking on me. I'm good, better than good. The following week brought another inheritance dispute. This time a woman in her 40s whose biological father had left everything to the stepfather who'd actually raised her. The biological father's other children were suing, claiming their father had been manipulated by his stepdaughter. During the hearing, I listened to testimony about a stepfather who'd attended every school event, paid for college, sat beside a hospital bed during a near-fatal illness, a biological father who'd sent birthday cards, occasionally, and showed up for major milestones when, convenient. The biological half-siblings argued that their father's final wishes were obviously clouded by sentiment. Looked at the stepfather in the witness stand, a man in his 70s with tears streaming down his face as he explained that he'd never wanted the inheritance, had tried to refuse it, but honored it because my daughter, because Rachel insisted. It was what her mother would have wanted. The biological children's attorney argued passionately about bloodlines and natural inheritance rights. I let him finish his argument, then delivered my ruling. I've heard similar arguments many times in this courtroom. Arguments that biology creates automatic entitlement, that DNA determines who deserves love, loyalty, and legacy. I looked directly at the biological half-siblings. But inheritance law isn't about what you believe you deserve. It's about honoring the clearly stated wishes of someone who had the legal right to distribute their property as they chose. I gestured to the stack of evidence. The deceased wrote multiple letters explaining his decision. He had full mental capacity, confirmed by 3 independent physicians. He explicitly stated that the man who raised his daughter, who stayed when he left, deserved to be recognized for that commitment. My voice grew firmer. This court will not overturn a clear, legally sound will simply because biological children feel entitled to wealth from a parent they barely knew. The will stands as written. Case dismissed. The stepfather broke down completely, and Rachel, the woman at the center of it all, held him while he sobbed. After court adjourned, Rachel approached my bench. "Thank you, Your Honor. My dad, my real dad. The one who raised me, he didn't want to keep the money if it meant fighting. But my mother made him promise to honor what my biological father wanted." "Your biological father made the right choice," I said. He recognized, even if late, who the real parent was. She nodded, wiping tears. "I read about your case years ago when I was trying to understand my own family. It gave me permission to acknowledge that the man who raised me was my true father, even though we don't share DNA. These moments, these small recognitions that the work mattered, that speaking truth helped others claim their own truth, made every difficult ruling worth it." That night, I updated my own will. To Martha Wilson, who'd bandaged my childhood wounds and continued making lemon bundt cake every Saturday, the house and garden she'd helped Eleanor maintain for 4 decades. To Patricia Hughes, who'd fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, Benjamin's Law Library and legal papers, to Sarah Harrison and attorneys like her, a foundation I'd established to provide legal representation for children and non-biological families in custody battles. To various friends, colleagues and my chosen family, personal items, photographs, Eleanor's journals, Benjamin's fountain pens, to Catherine Wright and Marcus Wright's estate, nothing. Not out of spite, but because absence creates no claim. I wrote a letter to accompany the will, borrowing Eleanor's tradition. To whoever reads this after I'm gone, I was abandoned by my biological parents at 4 months old. I was saved by my grandparents, who became my parents through choice rather than obligation. They taught me that family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your burdens, your joys, your ordinary Sundays. This will reflects those values. The people named here earned their place in my life and my legacy through presence, through love, through the daily choice to stay. If you're reading this because you're fighting over this will, stop. You don't deserve what's here if you have to fight for it. Real family doesn't fight over money. Real family fights for each other. Stand tall. Stay present. Choose love. 15 years after the original trial, I was invited to speak at Benjamin's alma mater, the same law school where I'd struggled through contracts and constitutional law while driving home every Sunday for dinner. The auditorium was packed. Law students, professors, judges, attorneys, all gathered for a symposium on redefining family in modern law. I stood at the podium where Benjamin had stood 40 years earlier, delivering the same annual lecture on judicial ethics. "My name is Judge Madison Cole," I began, "and I'm going to tell you a story about how 2 people in their 60s saved a 4-month-old infant and accidentally changed family law in South Carolina." I told them everything. The abandonment, the Sunday dinners, the lemon bundt cake, the hibiscus garden, the lawsuit, the vindication. But I also told them about the cases that followed, hundreds of them over 15 years. Each one a child or family member fighting for recognition that love matters more than DNA. The law is slowly changing, I explained. Courts are increasingly willing to acknowledge that psychological parents, the people who do the actual work of parenting, deserve legal recognition, even without biological connection. I showed statistics, states that had reformed custody laws, precedents that prioritize stability over biology, growing acceptance that step-parents, grandparents, foster parents, and others could be legal parents if they functioned as parents. But we have so much further to go, I continued. Too many children are still returned to biological parents who've done nothing to earn that title except contribute DNA. Too many loving, committed caregivers are denied legal rights because they lack biological connection. I paused, letting the weight of that settle. You, the next generation of attorneys and judges, you have the power to continue changing these laws, to look at each case individually and ask the only question that matters: what's actually in this child's best interest? A student raised her hand. Judge Cole, do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if your biological parents had kept you? I considered the question carefully. Yes, I admitted. Sometimes I wonder. But then I think about who I am. Someone who was taught that integrity matters more than convenience, that truth matters more than comfort, that showing up matters more than showing off. I gestured to Benjamin's portrait hanging on the wall behind me. If Catherine and Marcus had kept me, I might have had more material wealth sooner. I might have had the normal family structure society expects. But I wouldn't have had Sunday dinners with a man who dedicated his life to justice. I wouldn't have learned to garden from a woman who taught me that life blossoms even after loss. My voice grew stronger. I wouldn't be standing here as a judge who understands what it means to be chosen, to be saved, to be loved not because you had to be, but because someone wanted to love you. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave. After the lecture, dozens of students approached with their own stories, raised by grandparents, adopted, foster care survivors, step-families, chosen families of all configurations. You're giving us permission to claim our truth, one student said. To stop pretending our biological parents were real parents just because society expects us to. Truth is the most powerful tool you have, I told her. Use it wisely. That evening, I drove to Magnolia Cemetery one last time, a ritual I'd maintained for 15 years, fresh hibiscus blooms in hand. I knelt between Benjamin and Eleanor's graves as the sun set over Charleston. 15 years, I told them. 15 years of trying to honor what you taught me, of protecting kids who needed protection, of recognizing real family when I saw it. The cardinal appeared right on schedule, landing on Eleanor's headstone. I know you're proud, I said. Martha tells me constantly. Sarah tells me you'd be proud. Everyone tells me. I placed the flowers carefully, but I need you to know something else. I'm proud of you. Proud that when a scared young couple abandoned their baby, you didn't turn away. You could have. No one would have blamed two people in their 60s for saying, we've done our part. Tears flowed freely now. But you didn't. You stayed. You chose me every single day for 32 years. And because of that choice, I've been able to help hundreds of other kids who needed someone to choose them too. The cardinal chirped, a clear, bright sound in the growing darkness. The legacy isn't the money, is it? It never was. The legacy is the lesson. That family is choice. That love is action. That staying matters more than any biological connection ever could. I stood, brushing grass from my skirt, a gesture I'd made 1,000 times at these graves. I'll keep fighting, I promised them. For every kid who needs someone to choose them. For every family that's built on love instead of obligation. For every person who needs permission to claim their truth. The cardinal flew away into the dusk. I walked back to my car, past rows of weathered tombstones marking lives lived and legacies left. Some people leave money. Some leave property. Some leave nothing but painful memories. Benjamin and Eleanor Cole left something more valuable. They left proof that family isn't about who you're born to. It's about who chooses to stay. And that lesson, passed from them to me to countless others, would outlive any inheritance money could buy. I never saw Catherine again after that final court hearing. I heard rumors occasionally that she'd remarried in California, that she'd tried to write a memoir painting herself as the victim, that she'd finally gotten the therapy she needed. I didn't care enough to investigate. Marcus died without ever meeting his grandchildren, not because I had any, but because the relationship had died 33 years before he did. The estate they'd fought so hard to steal? I used most of it to establish the Cole Family Foundation, providing legal representation for children in custody battles and supporting non-biological families fighting for recognition. The house, Benjamin and Eleanor's house, became a gathering place for my chosen family. Sunday dinners continued, now with Martha's grandchildren learning to make lemon bundt cake, now with Sarah's children playing in Eleanor's garden. The hibiscus still bloomed every summer, brilliant and resilient, exactly as Eleanor taught me to be. And every Sunday, without fail, I set 3 extra places at the table, one for Benjamin, one for Eleanor, one for anyone who needed a place to belong, because that's what they taught me. There's always room at the table for people who need family, for people who need to be chosen, for people who need to know that staying matters. The Charleston Post ran a feature on my 10th anniversary as a judge. The headline read, "Judge Madison Cole, Redefining Family Through Justice." They interviewed people whose cases I'd decided. Children now grown, grateful their voices were heard. Grandparents raising grandchildren, thankful for legal recognition. Step-parents finally acknowledged as real parents. The reporter asked me the same question everyone asks. Do you ever regret not reconciling with your biological parents? My answer never changes. You can't reconcile with people who were never there to begin with. Reconciliation requires a previous relationship, and we never had one. What I have instead is clarity. Clarity about who my real parents were, clarity about what family means, and clarity about my purpose, which is making sure other kids don't have to fight as hard as I did to protect the people who actually loved them. That article was framed and hung in my chambers, right beside Benjamin's portrait and a pressed hibiscus flower from Eleanor's garden. Some people think family is determined by blood running through your veins. They're wrong. Family is determined by who stands beside you when everyone else walks away. Who shows up for the boring Sundays, not just the exciting holidays. Who stays through the difficult seasons, not just the easy ones. My biological parents gave me DNA. Benjamin and Eleanor gave me everything else: love, stability, wisdom, values, and the unshakable certainty that I was chosen, wanted, and worth staying for. When Catherine and Marcus came back demanding their rightful inheritance, they didn't understand that they'd already received everything they deserved. Nothing. Because they'd given nothing except biology, and biology isn't enough. The real inheritance, the one that mattered, wasn't money or property. It was the lesson that family is built through daily choice, through presence, through love demonstrated in 1,000 small ways over decades. That lesson saved me. And through my work, it saved hundreds of other children who needed someone to recognize that the people raising them, loving them, choosing them, those were their real families. Regardless of biology, if you're reading this and you were raised by someone who chose you rather than someone who simply created you, honor them. Protect them. Recognize that what they gave you is more valuable than any biological connection. And if you're reading this while fighting your own battle, against people who think biology creates automatic entitlement, stand tall. Like the hibiscus flowers that survive the coldest winters. Truth is on your side, even when the fight is hard. Family isn't who you're born to. Family is who stays. And staying, that daily choice to show up, to love, to be present, that's the only inheritance that truly matters.